Good afternoon and welcome back to the Lynn Lowdown. I'm Danny Vittori, and today we have on the first ever Urban Forestry Fellow for the City of Lynn. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Danny. My name's Erica Holm. I am the City of Lynn's first Urban Forestry Fellow in our planning department, and I started in June of this year.
Great, so you're brand new, about 2 months into it. I gotta ask, what is involved in your role? Because I'll be honest, I was not fully certain what a Forestry Fellow does.
Okay, great. Well, I also was not entirely certain what a Forestry Fellow would do in the City of Lynn, but I am coming from 5 years of urban forestry work in Boston. So I'll start by answering with what the urban forest is, because to do practice on something, you have to know what it is. So the urban forest is, in any municipality, it's all of the trees and shrubs, so any woody vegetation that you have across your whole city. That might be on public property, it could be on school lots, cemeteries, parks, but people are mostly familiar with urban forestry as having a relationship with the trees that are in the street tree pits in the sidewalks. So as you're walking down the street, you see a tree in a sidewalk. Not a lot of people are looking up thinking about how that got there and everything that went into getting that tree to grow and become a canopy tree. But the urban forest is, all of that woody vegetation. And so the planning department at City Hall applied for a grant through the federal government, and it's passed through the Arbor Day Foundation. And that is a $550,000 grant to hire my position, the Urban Forestry Fellow. And what I'll mostly be doing is taking care of trees in the city. That's the simplest way to put it. I could answer your question in a really long format, but I think I'll just leave it there and let you ask another question.
I do. I appreciate the simplicity. I get that. And in addition to hiring you, there's so many other levels of it, like a health survey, planting program, so many things that you'll be involved in. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, absolutely. So we just got 2 additional grants to the $550,000 initial grant, and those 2 grants will be focused on expanding and widening street tree pits, planting new trees, and the third one will have to do with that tree health survey. So the total amount of funding that we've received just recently is $682,000 for urban forestry in the City of Lynn. The big chunk that hired my position is also affiliated with the planting of 150 trees in the environmental justice communities in Lynn. So there are specific areas where trees have died or been cut down or haven't been pruned or have been damaged by storms. And those are the areas that tend to be hotter during the summer. People may have experienced that this summer with the big heat waves that we had. So we'll be focusing on planting the right trees in the right places in those neighborhoods. And a third thing, or fourth thing, I don't know what number I'm on at this point, but another thing or element of these grants is workforce development and youth programming and community engagement. So it's not really just about trees. You can put as much money as you want into trees, and you won't be accomplishing much if you don't have the involvement of the people who are living and working and walking by the trees every day, and also importantly, the people who take care of the trees as their full-time job.
And I mean, people might know this a little bit, but what's the importance of expanding the tree canopy in Lynn, having a denser one? What are the advantages to that?
Yeah, I mean, trees do everything. So yeah, I'm biased because I'm an arborist, but trees will filter air, they'll filter stormwater, so they're removing pollutants from those 2 things. They're creating oxygen for people to breathe fresher air. It's a big problem when you have a lot of car emissions, you have a lot of emissions from other, heavy machinery operation, construction, things like that. You really need to have like the lungs of your city be expanding, and the only way to do that is to really think many years ahead. So trees are living on much longer lifespans than people are, but that doesn't mean that we can't plan for them to be around for future generations. So that's actually one of the most rewarding parts of my job, is actually thinking ahead, because tree canopy is not just related to a tree planted. A young tree, maybe 2 inches around the trunk, is not going to be providing the giant shade that an old American elm might have been providing if it had been planted many years ago. There's a lot of sayings about this, but if you plant a tree now, you're setting up the future for healthier air, healthier water, less flooding, less erosion, because the tree's roots are sucking up all that water that's passing through. And you're also, the big one right now is shade, because cities are getting hotter, and the urban heat island effect is really impacting communities that have had all other sorts of impacts as well. So say we're a coastal community. Say you're a coastal community, there's a lot of people who are lower income who are living in that area. There's a lot of people of color or other historically marginalized groups living in that area. Those are the neighborhoods where trees haven't been taken care of as well, oftentimes, in most cities. And we see that in Lynn too. There are certain areas that don't have as many trees, they don't have as much shade, it's much hotter, and all of these things kind of compound to make a less healthy neighborhood. So expanding our tree canopy, especially into those areas that haven't had as many trees in the past 20 years, that'll really set us up for 50 years from now, those neighborhoods being healthier and actually safer and just feeling a lot nicer. I could keep going because trees slow traffic, they improve mental and physical well-being just by changing the character of the neighborhood, and they're beautiful. They also provide homes for wildlife, so there's tons of benefits to having an expanded tree canopy.
So you can tell how passionate you are about it too, and you mentioned the forward-thinking piece of it. So you're engaging with youth, other members of the community. How are both you and then the departments you work with doing that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways for this one too, but I want to see it expanded even more. So I'm a big fan of mentorship. It took me a long time to realize that urban forestry was what I wanted to do, and it took me a long time to realize that I could be paid to do a job working with trees. People just don't know. And also the political climates and the funding climates have never been as kind of focused on urban forestry as they are right now. The federal government gave out the Inflation Reduction Act funding, which was $1.5 billion in urban forestry funding across the United States. Lynn deserves to get some of that funding and get some of that resource here. So what we'll be doing is I've already started talking with Lynn Public Schools. I've already started talking with the Lynn Summer Youth Engagement Program, which is run out of the Community Development Department. We actually had a crew, the downtown crew was able to attend our Liberty Tree Day event just a couple days ago or yesterday. And we're going to be kind of having a cohort of students who can be mentored by myself and other people in my urban forestry network. We really want to get folks paid. We really want to get folks trained. Arboriculture itself, so the profession of being someone who takes care of trees on kind of more of the manual labor side and less of the planning side, it's a very dangerous job. It's a very difficult, kind of labor-intensive job, but it's very rewarding. You get to be outside every day. It improves your physical health in a big degree. I want to increase access to those jobs for people who might not have been able to access them before, and I would love to see after this position ends, which this is a 3-year contract term position, I would love to facilitate Lynners to have access to urban forestry or urban forestry related careers.
Expanding that knowledge, because I'll admit I really don't know much about your chosen career, so you said expanding that knowledge.
Yeah, expanding knowledge is one of the biggest things, because I think people read, they'll read media pieces that kind of sensationalize trees, and they talk about all trees as almost like one type of organism, but there's thousands of species of trees. They all have different growth forms and habits. They all have different leaf shapes and bark and different life cycles, and they also can have different reproductive systems and ways of operating. So something that's coming to mind is a lot of folks will say city planners are responsible for there only being male trees on the landscape. That's based on one species of tree, the ginkgo tree, where the female tree has these very smelly fruits. So we could go down the rabbit hole on every type of tree species, and I think the best thing to do is just increase people's education, and kind of in a roundabout way, I'm trying to get back to biodiversity. So just like having a city that's culturally diverse and has a lot of vibrant different things going on, and something for everybody to engage in, you really need to have a diverse urban forest as well. So trees of different heights, trees that flower at different times, trees that make fruits, trees that don't. You want to kind of not just pick one tree species or one type of tree or one process to follow, but really chase down all those different avenues that people could get involved or connect with trees, and get your actual urban forest to be biodiverse in terms of the species that are out there too. Makes everything more resilient for the future.
It does. Like you said, if you just have one type of tree, that's not going to work.
No, and that has resulted in some really massive mistakes in planning in the past in different American cities. One of those being invasive pests and diseases that come in and affect trees in urban forests. So I'm thinking most proximally about the Dutch elm disease, because we just celebrated Liberty Tree Day on August 14th and planted an American elm tree. It used to be the favorite tree of many cities when you think of a tree-lined street and that vase-shaped canopy, a very large shade tree. You're usually thinking in your mind's eye of an American elm. But because they were favored and planted in what's called a monoculture, so just American elms in every street tree pit down the whole street, Dutch elm disease was much more likely to actually be able to successfully kill all of those trees at once, because there was no biodiversity.
Right, yeah.
So by having a lot of different types of trees, you can become resilient to problems of the future.
And you also do very well explaining it to people like me who don't know that much about trees. But I do have to wrap up in a moment, but was there anything that I hadn't touched upon that you wanted to make sure you mentioned?
Yeah, I'd love to just mention that if you're interested in this segment at all, I would really encourage you to check out our Urban Forestry website. The link is, I think, in this video and available through us. Give me a call. I would love to talk to anyone about individual trees, but also the urban forest plan that we're going to be creating over the next 3 years. So whether you know about arborists, whether you are an arborist, whether you've never heard of an arborist or an urban forester in your life, everyone in the city lives around trees and has something important to say about them, and I'd love to connect with everyone who has those ideas.
Great. Well, I said thanks again for coming on and spreading that message and spreading that awareness for us.
Thanks so much for having me, and hopefully we'll get some new trees planted right around the studio.
Yes, that would look amazing. And once again, I'm Danny Vittori. This has been the Lynn Lowdown, and we'll see you next week with more guests.